All right. Well, what do you got for us for a better version of Dexter's Laboratory?
So for Dexter's Laboratory, I decided to make my movie an animated movie, and I also had it cross over with a different franchise. I'll mention that my director is Michael Rianda, who just did Mitchell vs. the Machines, which is possibly the best movie of the whole year 2020, definitely the best animated movie so far. And the franchise I crossed it over with is Scooby Doo. We'll get into that a little bit when I get into my pitch. But Dexter is kind of preparing for a science lab and a science fair, and he's working late in his lab. He has a really kind of big high stakes experiment going on. He has his rival Mandark that we know from the show is also in the science fair, so Dexter's kind of stressed to make this the best possible experiment he can do. But the experiment goes wrong. He pours his chemicals in too much when he's too tired at late at night, and there's kind of a big explosion of smoke and dust, and he creates a ghost in his lab. So the Scooby Gang is enlisted to help solve the mystery of the haunted laboratory, and they kind of come into the world of Dexter's lab and interact with a lot of the characters. I think the comedy dynamics of this would be really interesting. You have sort of like the forever skeptic and the very science-oriented Dexter, and he's contrasting with the Scooby Gang, who's had these kind of bizarre experiences. But they do kind of mention like, oh yeah, there's always someone behind it. It's always a practical experience. And Thelma has like a quip line of saying, oh, except for the time there were zombies, implying like, oh, the one time they went to Zombie Island is there. But all of these new Scooby Doo stuff where it's like really ridiculous and huge and big, like the new movies, are not part of this kind of story here. I think it would be fun to see Dexter interact with Thelma because Thelma has that really science techie kind of mind, and I think they can get into like the weeds of a lot of techno babble and talk about some really fun like science and lab kind of conversations that would be fun to see them have. And I also think Shaggy and Scooby would be fun with Dexter because they're such klutzes and they're always like knocking stuff over and not knowing what's going on. And Dexter, of course, is very protective of his lab. So with Scooby and Shaggy, you ever knock anything over, and he's always upset about it. And I also wanted to add in some family bonding because I think Mitchell vs. Machines, what was really interesting was the family dynamic of that. You really had like a family coming together in this story. So I wanted, since Dexter's out of his lab and he isn't normally out of his lab for this long, he's having a chance to kind of connect with Dee Dee, connect with his mom and dad a little bit more than he normally does. So you're seeing that Dexter family also come together too a bit. And of course, you still get the investigation. Scooby Doo and the gang are trying to investigate this lab, and they're seeing some mysterious occurrences. They're not quite sure that it's a ghost, and they're trying to come up with some kind of rational explanation for it. And in the end, the ghost is Mandark, Dexter's rival. He did this to try and keep Dexter out of his lab the couple of days before the science fair, so that Mandark could upshow Dexter and kind of become the biggest scientist of the whole area, which is his kind of goal throughout the show. He wants to prove himself as the ultimate genius, but of course, he gets caught. And Dexter's learned a bit of a lesson himself. He's learned to value his family a bit more. He didn't spend much time with them beforehand, but now he's kind of seen a bit more of what they can mean to him and what they can do for him. And that's my story. You get the bonding of Dexter and his family a little bit, but you also get a lot of time with Dexter and the Scooby Gang solving a mystery within the lab. And like classic Scooby Doo stories, there's always a rational explanation. So turns out it was just Mandark the whole time. And that's my pitch for Dexter's Lab.
All right. During that, I'm not sure if Bobby was
Yeah,
frozen or just had the same look on his face throughout the whole thing. I was
I
trying to
was
see if he
listening,
was
so
moving, and I didn't see him moving,
yeah,
so I can't tell. But
listening
all right,
intently, so I couldn't tell you.
I like the classic Cartoon Network crossover there. And yeah, Mitchell's versus the Machines is definitely my favorite, my personal favorite movie of the year. So Joe, what do you got to combat with Tristan's version of Dexter's Laboratory?
All right, so my director is going to be Seth MacFarlane, who obviously you know from like Family Guy, and he's also done sci-fi stuff like The Orville, and then I also brought in the classic voices for Dexter and Dee Dee, but I wanted to include some of the other characters from outside of like the main Dexter cast. Basically, the Justice Friends. You have Val Hallen, who's essentially like Thor meets a rock star, and he's going to be voiced by Jack Black. You also have Major Glory, who's essentially Superman meets Captain America, voiced by John Cena, and then the Infraggable Krunk, who is essentially the Hulk but purple, going to be voiced by Vin Diesel. And I also am making mine a short film. So one thing I say is when animated shows change animation styles, it never looks good. So I would essentially just keep the same animation style, but just do it like in 4K and like HD, and just make it look clean and make it look good. And for my plot, Dexter is working on a machine he needs help with, so he decides the best course of action is to pull a bunch of Dexters from the multiverse into his lab to help him. He pulls a hair from his comb to get the needed DNA for his multiverse machine so it can find the other Dexters. What he didn't know was his annoying sister Dee Dee used his comb earlier that day, and he grabbed her hair, and now his lab is populated with dozens of alternate universe Dee Dees. There are old Dee Dees, middle-aged Dee Dees, baby Dee Dees, male Dee Dees, cave woman Dee Dees, robot Dee Dees, and Dexter realizes he has to send them all back to their original universes before his parents find out and wreck his lab. After struggling a while, he calls on the Justice Friends to help him fight the Dee Dees and send them back. And that's kind of the main plot, is them all working together to send the Dee Dees back to the machine. And I said I think this could be a really cool and fun 30 to 40 minute short for HBO Max, where Dexter's Lab currently streams. And because of the fact that the episodes were kind of always split into 2 or even 3 parts, a short would still be longer than any story you got from an actual episode. And that's my pitch. Oh, one thing I do want to add is one of the reasons I picked Seth MacFarlane is he wrote 4 episodes of the original show. And I feel like with his sci-fi work on the Orville and some of the sci-fi stuff he'll include in episodes of Family Guy, I think he'd be a good fit. And then that's all I have.
As Bobby said in the comments, you are lucky he is the deciding judge on this one.
I like Seth MacFarlane quite a bit more than Johnny. Well, I actually like Seth MacFarlane, actually.
Yeah,
So,
well,
yeah.
not hard to do. All right, so that being said, so Tristan started, so we're going to give him a minute on the clock.
Do you guys have questions? Or?
Yeah, I do. I have a couple. I don't know if Johnny
yeah. Bobby, ask your question. I'll see if I got anything.
My only one for Tristan is what because Joe described his animation style as being like a 4K version of the original. What is yours going to be? Is it going to be a little bit more modern 3D, or is it 2D? What's the visual style?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go back to the 2D style. I think you've seen a lot of 3D animation in movies and stuff, and I think people are kind of ready to get like a throwback stuff, especially if you're going to this 90s kind of throwback show. You want it to kind of feel a bit like a throwback. You know, it is a 2D animation, but the quality I definitely think is a lot higher. You know, it's going to be still like a 1080p high quality animation.
Okay, and then for Joe, you may have said it, I might have missed it, but with Seth MacFarlane doing this, and you said he wrote a lot on the original show, but is he going to bring his more kind of R-rated humor to it?
No, I feel like it's more just going to be more like the classic, kind of the similar tone of the original show. Because he's shown with things like the Orville and other things that it doesn't necessarily have to be like this R-rated comedy, and he can do more like PG-rated stuff.
All right.
That's all I had. My one question is for Tristan, because he mentioned obviously one of the strong points of Mitchell's versus the Machines is the family dynamic, and he's going to kind of delve into that in his version of Dexter's Lab. But because you kind of talked about Dexter interacting with like Scooby and Shaggy and with Velma, but how are the characters going to interact with Dee Dee? Are we going to get a scene? Are we going to get like Dee Dee kind of teaming up with Scooby and Shaggy because they're kind of like the clumsy like goofballs, or are you not really going to get into like the family dynamics with the Scooby gang?
Yeah, I definitely had Dee Dee be a part of the story. I add my paragraphs here that she goes out with Daphne, because I think that's kind of a contrast. They're very different. They're similar like types of people, but their personalities and everything about them is very kind of different. So I think they'd be a fun pairing to be together, and they're sort of like as the damsel in distress a bit throughout the story. But I think that'd be like a fun bonding of Daphne and Dee Dee, and Daphne can kind of even comfort Dee Dee a bit, because Dee Dee is much younger than her, and Daphne can be like this role model a bit for her to look up to and be like, hey, it gets a bit better when you're out of school, you know, that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, then I think that answers the only question I really had there. So Tristan, you get a minute on the clock. Bobby, you have a timer?
I
Ready?
do.
All right, cool. Then Tristan, you get a minute. Talk about why your movie is better than Joe's.
Well, for one, I'm not going to go too much on the Seth MacFarlane, but I do think as a writer, he's solid, but as a director, he hasn't really shown anything that really like blew me away or even was very good. Like a lot of his directed movies are pretty bad, so I don't necessarily think giving him a direction role is what I would do. And I also think that mine works because it is that crossover. It's not just like, oh, here's Dexter's Lab for a few minutes. It's like you're actually getting Scooby-Doo and Dexter's Lab, two things that are kind of lost to culture. And you've seen Scooby-Doo that's gotten like
30 seconds.
Scooby-Doo's gotten kind of grounded up into this like the last Scoob movie was pretty bad, so I want to bring a chance to not just do Dexter's Lab right, but do Scooby Doo right, and give both of those characters and both of those shows a chance to shine in 2021 and come back into the forefront.
Okay, you got 10 seconds.
10 seconds. Joe sucks. So go ahead.
Good use
Alright.
of the 10
All
seconds.
done. You're done then. Okay.
All right,
All
Joe.
right,
Whenever
Joe,
Bobby's
minute,
ready.
Whenever you start talking.
All right, so my main thing against Tristan's is I feel like the comedy doesn't really line up. Like, I still can't picture in my head kind of, because basically in the show, Dexter's just like this kind of douchebag like character, like him and all the characters in that world, like Dexter and Mandark Dee Dee are just like all these weird, annoying characters, and Scooby Doo is a lot more like chill and relaxed and laid back, and I just don't know if, like, yeah, they're different and sometimes opposites go together, but I just don't think those two like styles really go together well at all. I just can't see them interacting. And as far as
30 seconds.
and that's my main big negative against him or against his. And I feel like part of the problem is it's like too old school. It's two properties that aren't really popular anymore. One of the things I included the Justice Friends in mine is because you can do, there's, because of the MCU and other things, there's a lot more jokes you can include in the area of the multiverse and other things that are popular and happening now that you can reference and that you can talk about that you couldn't before.
All right, time's up. Okay. So now 2 minutes. Johnny, you're muted still, but you guys get 2 minutes. Tristan, you start. And whenever you start talking to rebut or bring up new points, whatever you want to do, go ahead.
All right. So my first point I'm going to address is the comedy aspect. You said that these are very different characters that you wouldn't see interacting, and I think that is kind of the point. Like, I put them together because they're opposites. And you mentioned that Scooby Gang is much more chill and not like these douchey, arrogant characters. And I think the Scooby Gang is, but the characters they meet, like each episode they meet new characters in these towns they go to, and those people aren't chill. Those people are kind of the douches. Those people are kind of people who go through the arcs and make the changes and kind of are the ones that the Scooby Gang, through their good nature, kind of inspires. So you mentioned that like Dee Dee and Dexter are kind of weird, almost douchey characters, and that's part of the story. I mentioned that they kind of grow and connect a bit more than they had in the show here. So it's a chance for them to readdress that douchiness of these characters a little bit and make them a bit more likable, a bit more growth to them. And you said that Scooby-Doo is not popular, that Dexter's Lab is not popular. I think Scooby-Doo is very popular. That movie that came out recently made a lot of money, and the show is there's still new shows coming out for this franchise. So it's not a dead IP at all, and yours is more superhero stuff, and I get that's popular, but I'd like to see something different and not just yet another like superhero multiverse joke for 20 minutes. I think that mine just gets the most out of Dexter's Lab and gets the most out of Scooby-Doo because I think it has that kind of skeptical, douchey, anxiety-like energy of Dexter's Lab episode, and it contrasts with like the chill, goofy vibes of a Scooby-Doo episode. And I think that that's crossover to two different things coming together rather than like two things that are very similar in the same vein that just kind of feel like more of the same. So I think bringing two different things together in a crossover is what makes a crossover very interesting. You look at like Talk Nickelodeon, you had Jimmy Neutron and Fairly Odd Parents, not just different shows, but totally different animation styles. And they're still able to make that crossover work. So I think you talk about these things, these shows are different from each other. Like, that's a bad thing. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a positive for my movie, that these are different characters and different vibes and different shows. And I think it would be a fun challenge to merge those tones together. And I think that our director can do it. And if he pulls it off, I think we'd have a really great movie that gets the most out of iconic characters from our childhoods, from the childhoods of our parents, from a lot of different generations kind of coming together.
Okay. All good. All right, Joe, whenever you start talking.
All right. Well, first off, you said Scoob made a lot of money. It made $26.4 million. I understand it was in the middle of a pandemic, but Tom and Jerry made $124 million, almost 5 times as much. So I wouldn't use that as a movie as an example that people still care about that franchise. As far as your point against the opposites, I feel like, yes, opposites can, go together and work together and make something better. I just feel like your movie almost feels more like a Scooby-Doo movie, like from how you pitch it, where it's like, oh, they go and they meet these people and those people change, where it's a Dexter's Laboratory, and your movie still feels like, oh, like the shitty people that they go and see are supposed to now be the main characters, and I don't know if that necessarily fits. With my movie, I feel like comedy and style, and it's also shorter. Like, I tried watching Dexter's Lab, and I don't know if, like, that whole thing could sustain a full movie. You even look at like the animated Scoob movies. Like I don't know how great those really are. I don't know if that can really hold like a full attention movie, and that's why I personally went
1 minute.
for a short with mine, because it's 30 to 40 minutes. You watch it, you enjoy it, it's over. I feel like it's a nice plot that goes well with Dexter's Laboratory and goes to the base of what Dexter's Laboratory of like him and his sister, and I don't know if ghosts and all that necessarily go into what I would expect from a Dexter's Lab. I also don't really understand the plot of Mandark pretends to be a ghost, and that's somehow supposed to make Dexter be a bad
30
scientist.
seconds.
Doesn't really fully make sense to me either. And that's all. That's all I got.
Okay.
All right. Okay, Bobby, you're making the final call, so I'll kind of just put my thoughts out there. I loved Mitchell's versus the Machines, but I don't necessarily see the fit with Tristan's pitch all the way, especially talking about the animation style being closer to like the Dexter's Lab, because I think the animation style of Mitchell's versus the Machines was one of the really strong elements of it. But overall, if I'm scrolling through, Disney Plus or Netflix or anything, and it has these two movies on it, and one is a short film and one is a full movie with the Scooby-Doo, I think it was smart to incorporate another franchise into it. And I wouldn't necessarily think that a short film, like, it just seems like, I mean, Seth MacFarlane, I understand the pick more after Joe explained that he helped work on the original show, but it just seems like an extended episode of the show. I don't think it's necessarily smart to take an animated show and just do a short film with it. I'm not as into that as like a full movie incorporating the Scooby-Doo gang. I think that's an interesting concept. I think those characters do go well together because they contrast so much that I think it would make interesting pairings. I'd like to see Dee Dee interact with Scooby and Shaggy. I think that could be really funny. I'd like to see Dexter interact with Velma. So I think, just me personally, I'd be more into Tristan's pick, but I wasn't 100% sold on either one.
Yeah, I was very similar. Like, there was a lot of elements of Tristan's that I loved, and there were a couple that didn't quite come together for me, including kind of how it all resolved with Mandark being like pretending to be a ghost. But I think Joe, with an animated kind of thing to make that a short film, I don't know if I love that decision. Like, it's not bad, but the Seth MacFarlane fit too to go along with that. I think, because I actually do like Seth MacFarlane quite a bit, and I like his more raunchy styled humor. I think it's kind of a waste to put him into something that on an animated level that's kind of a little bit more like a throwback kind of basic thing without adding his kind of touches to it. But overall, I think the crossover Scooby-Doo sounds like a lot of fun. It just that called to me more than seeing like just a short version of Dexter's Lab, like a shortened movie. So I'm gonna give it to Tristan, but it was pretty close for me. It wasn't like a runaway. It was definitely closer than it was for Johnny.
Yeah, well, Joe made it closer than I would have originally thought when as soon as he said Seth MacFarlane. I think he did a good job kind of explaining what it would be. But yeah, I agree. I think if you're gonna do it nowadays, after MacFarlane has a more established career, I think you should have gone more adult humor type Dexter with it, and it would have made it stand out, at least to like. Then I could have seen it for fans of Seth MacFarlane. It'll stand out.
Yeah.
Right, and of course you didn't know Tristan's pitch, but it would have separated the two style wise and like humor just to be a little bit more. But I am disappointed none of you brought up the Robo Dexo 2000, which is his big giant fighting robot, because that would have been fun to add into the movie. But
hey, you guys